All right, good morning, everybody. Hey, it's Todd Conklin. I'm going to introduce myself as the CEO of Distinctive Properties, Mid-America, and Prime Properties, which all operate under the franchise of Coldwell Banker. And you might be asking why. And the primary reason is because on this call today, we're going to have some people that we don't normally see. We're going to have some consumers that maybe aren't even in the industry that have got some questions as to what's going on. We're going to have some questions and some people here from outside of our organization. Of course, we've got people within our organization, and there might be some others. I think the name of the game here is that there's nothing to hide. We are here to inform, and I just want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to ask whatever questions that they may have. I've got some special guests with me. I've got Casey Steen Johnson. She is our general counsel, in-house counsel. To answer all of the legal questions. I've got Jeff Renevere, who is the Vice President of Sales, and he's going to be here to answer some questions about what do we do with this information as real estate professionals. And then it's me. I'm not sure exactly what I'm here to do other than make those two look really good. So I'll do my best for that. Listen, we made the decision not to produce a slideshow for you. We felt like, hey, you know what? You probably have seen enough PowerPoints, enough clickbait, enough nonsense headlines. If it bleeds, it leads kind of stuff. And we thought we would just take our time and walk through step by step what led us up until Thursday night, Friday morning, what happened on Thursday night, Friday morning, and what should we be doing moving forward? And, is this truly the end of the world, if you will? So with that, I would, first of all, from a participation standpoint, can you do me a favor? If you can hear me, would you put a thumbs up in the chat? Give me a thumbs up. Beautiful. Thank you very much. That means y'all can hear us. Beautiful. Thank you very much. All right. So with that, I would like to introduce General Counsel, our in-house counsel, the one and only Casey Steen Johnson.
All right. Thank you very much. Glad to see everybody today. Thank you for taking your time as we're starting to get really busy. We appreciate that, but also appreciate the importance of this topic and wanted to be able to talk through the facts of what we're dealing with and give you some tips and tricks to work through this and let you know how to talk to your clients, but really give you a better understanding of what we're dealing with. So before I jump into the meat of my presentation, which is really focused on the settlements, I do, as an attorney, have to give a legal disclaimer, so bear with me as I read through my disclaimer. This presentation is for informational purposes only, does not constitute legal advice. This presentation shall not be construed as an offer to represent you, nor is it intended to create, nor shall the receipt of the information constitute an attorney-client relationship. We hope this information is informative and useful as we navigate these complex settlements and the industry changes together. So now that fun part is out of the way, I will jump into the background of these commission suits. So over the past year, we've all been really aware of these long-standing commission lawsuits that have been playing out affecting our industry. And in the fall, we saw our first resolution of these suits, and it was notably with that Sitzer-Burnett lawsuit. And so what happened there is the plaintiffs were a number of home sellers that filed suit against the National Association of Realtors and some of the largest real estate franchisors. And they alleged that the defendants, the big real estate companies and NAR, were conspiring to inflate real estate commissions. And they were doing that by enforcing their cooperative compensation rule, which required listing brokers to offer compensation to buyer brokers. So in this lawsuit, and there were several other suits that were filed as well, what they claimed is that there were anti-competitive practices in place that forced sellers into a system to pay a commission split between buyer agents and seller agents. The plaintiffs in those cases believed that the buyer's agent fees were paid to the detriment of the home sellers and that home buyers should be paying their own agents. So that's really the crux of all this litigation. On October 31st of 2023, world headline news was made when the federal jury in that case found those defendants guilty in this antitrust case, and they awarded $1.8 billion in damages to the plaintiffs. And in an antitrust case, there's something that applies where a plaintiff can be awarded treble damages, which is triple the amount, which means the damages would be over $5 billion. That's huge, huge amount of money. That's a ridiculous amount of money. I know everybody hates attorneys now because of that, but we're not talking a small case. This is national, global news in the world of law everywhere. Now, that was October 31st. Just before that, in early October, we started to see some settlements come through from some of the defendants, which were some of the large franchisees participating in that litigation, not by choice. One of those was Anywhere Real Estate. They are the parent company to Coldwell Banker. I know we have a number of Coldwell Banker agents on today. So Anywhere Real Estate participated in that settlement. RE/MAX settled all in prior to the October 31st verdict. And then in February of 24, just last month, Keller Williams joined in the settlement. So almost all the large franchisee companies settled that litigation. And as part of that settlement, what we saw is they would pay a collective amount of $208 million. They would not require their members of their brokerages to be members of NAR. They would not be required to follow the NAR Code of Ethics or the MLS handbook. They would require or encourage their agents to make it clear that commissions are negotiable, that agents can set and negotiate commissions as they see fit, and that agents would not be required to make offers of compensation to any cooperating brokers. And they would prohibit their agents from sorting listings by offers of compensation, unless that was required by or requested by the client. So that whole settlement that we saw in the fall really aligned with an earlier settlement that it dated back to 2020 between the Department of Justice and NAR. And I'm going to get to a little bit of that later. This big settlement between Anywhere, RE/MAX, Keller Williams on that Sitzer-Burnett case does release all the members of those franchises from liability. So there's a big liability release there, which is a huge win for any members of those brokerages. And it's already received preliminary approval by the courts. So the federal judge, Steve Bow is his name, out of Kansas City. He's already given that settlement preliminary approval, and they're expecting the final approval come May. So that's a big deal for our agents. Anybody in, again, Anywhere, RE/MAX, Keller Williams, they are part of that settlement. That happened. That's the fall case. It also releases them from all of the copycat suits that were filed after that case. Big release of liability. And again, no major changes to our industry because it really aligns with the previous settlement between NAR and the DOJ. Now, fast forward to last Friday, when we get into the big headline news that NAR settled the case. Now, when we talked about this in October, I gave a presentation talking through the Anywhere settlement. And if you read any of the headlines then, you would have seen that NAR was adamant against settlement. They said, we will not settle. We firmly believe in the strength of our case. There will be no way we will settle this case. And at the time, that was true. They did not settle that litigation at that time. They had the verdict. They were found guilty. They vowed to appeal. They had started the appeal process. Fast forward to now, and NAR really took a close look at what the damages were going to be. Again, over $5 billion in damages. And if you read any statements from NAR, what they'll say now is they settled because of that dollar amount. They contemplated filing bankruptcy to resolve the issues because as That's just the fact of what it would have been when you're facing a $5 billion verdict. But ultimately they decided bankruptcy was not going to be the best option. If they could reach an agreeable settlement that included broad releases for all of their members, that would be in the best interest of NAR and their members. And so they did agree, finally, which was just announced, they reached a settlement of $418 million, which they'll pay out over a period of 4 years. And that settlement does contain several releases to it, which I will touch on. This settlement, just so everybody is aware, is proposed. So it's not final. It will probably take several months before it becomes final. But some of the proposed changes to this settlement are set to take effect in July of 2024. So here are the terms of this most recent settlement that were just announced. And if you want a copy of the settlement agreement, I'm happy to share it with you. It's 108 pages long, not that entertaining of reading. These bullet points are really all you need. So big changes. 1, offers of compensation cannot be listed in the MLS. So they can continue outside of the MLS. Consumers can pursue off MLS negotiations and consultation with their real estate professionals, but you can no longer put what your cooperating compensation is on the MLS. So that's out. Sellers can offer concessions on the MLS. So a seller concession is still allowable to be on the MLS as long as those concessions are not related to the payment of the buyer broker. So you can give a concession to pay buyer's closing costs. We can give increased amounts there, but you cannot pay commission to that buyer's agent through those concessions. Now, something to be aware of in practice as we start to see this play out with increased seller concessions, you've got to pay close attention to the limitations on interested party contributions. So work closely with the lender to make sure you know that what that buyer's loan product is particularly important for your buyer agents. Know what your buyer's loan product is, what their down payment is, and what any limitations on interested party contributions are. Because if your seller's offering $10,000 in seller concessions, and the buyer's limited to $5,000 in interested party contributions, you're going to have issues over that remaining $5,000. So something to watch for. The other part to watch for as this settlement is, again, now that you can't have compensation in the MLS, we're looking at other areas to negotiate compensation. Buyer brokers can offer that compensation or can negotiate offers of compensation outside of the MLS, but nothing can happen through the MLS. So one of the conversations we're seeing is that buyers can start putting this into their buy-sell agreements, into their purchase agreements, negotiate that compensation in the offer. And there have been, if you've watched any experts talk about this or read any articles, several of them are offering this as an alternative solution to the seller compensating the buyer's broker. Most states do not allow compensation to be addressed in the purchase agreement. So I polled all of our employing brokers with distinctive properties. In not one of our states, which is Idaho, Montana, Colorado, Kansas, Missouri, and Iowa, in not one of those states is that allowed. So don't believe everything you see on the news when they say negotiate this in your offer, because you probably can't legally do that. The recommendation I have as a way to negotiate commission is to use a separate commission agreement. That's typically how things are done in commercial transactions anyway. They use LoopNet, they use other services outside of the MLS that don't include offers of compensation, but they're compensated through the use of a separate commission agreement. That is legal. That's a fine way to negotiate your compensation. The last big change out of the settlement agreement is that MLS participants, so members of the MLS, will be required to enter into written buyer brokerage agreements or buyer representation agreements before offering any substantial assistance to a buyer. So the conversation of buyer brokerage agreements, exclusive buyer brokerage, exclusive buyer rep agreements, that's been an ongoing conversation. We talked about this several times in the fall. It's a great practice for buyers. Honestly, this is a really good thing from the settlement. And over the past year, something we've seen, or excuse me, not even the past year, just since January, we're seeing several states push to enact this into law. So I'm based in Iowa. In Iowa, this has been a big legislative agenda item for our local association, but this will be effective and mandated in law come July. And now it's a part of this settlement. So if you haven't already made it a practice to use those exclusive buyer brokerage agreements, now is the time to start familiarizing yourself with that, get comfortable with it. Jeff's going to give us all sorts of tips and tricks there. But that honestly is a very good thing for the industry. Gives us transparency, helps our buyers be aware of the process. Okay. When we talk about this settlement with NAR, one of the things I mentioned was it had a broad release of liability, which means these parties to the settlement cannot be sued. And that transfers down to members. So this is one of the other most important pieces of the settlement is who's covered, who's not covered. NAR negotiated in this settlement agreement that all members of NAR, all state and local realtor associations, all multiple listing services owned by realtor associations, and all brokers with a NAR member as principal that had residential transactions of $2 billion or less in 2022 are covered in this release. So again, when you ask, why did NAR settle this litigation? You're looking at billions of dollars, and they were able to get a huge release of liability. That's a big win in this settlement and really important for anybody who was not a member of those larger franchises that already settled and secured a release for their members. Who's not covered? Home Services of America, not covered as a result of this settlement. They are the only remaining defendant to this commission litigation. They're currently on appeal to the Supreme Court. The basis of their argument is that this whole case, as it relates to home services, should have gone through arbitration, not through the typical courts process. And for some of our agents in Iowa, you've heard us talk about those arbitration agreements. And I'm sure across the country, we see arbitration agreements with home services. We always say, don't sign those here. That's the crux of their litigation. That's why they're on appeal to the Supreme Court. Will be interesting to see how that plays out. The other parties not covered are MLSs that are not wholly owned by realtor organizations. So some of those flat fee brokerages that are not realtor companies that have just their, like a statewide MLS or a national MLS, not associated with NAR. They are not covered by the settlement, but they can opt into the settlement and pay a per subscriber fee to the settlement fund in order to participate in this settlement. And the last group is the brokerages exceeding $2 billion in volume. They are also not covered, but they have the same option to opt in to the settlement if they pay a per subscriber fee. So options for those companies, except for home services that are not covered, but it is a broad release. Now, I know there's some questions coming in, but I'll get through the rest of this and then we can work through some questions. The one piece that I'm really watching closely that I think will have an impact is what the Department of Justice does through all of these settlements. So there is an ongoing argument between the DOJ and NAR over this cooperative compensation rule. These two parties don't get along, they're fighting. In 2020, they reached a settlement and NAR adopted that clear cooperation policy. It impacted all MLSs across the company, required brokers to submit their listing within 1 business day of marketing the property. You couldn't state that your commissions as a buyer's agent were free. There were several terms to that settlement. We thought, great, they reached a settlement, everything's wonderful, fine, we're moving on. Well, and as part of that settlement, the DOJ said, okay, we'll close our investigations. NAR, you're good. Fast forward to 2021, we had a change in the presidential regime, and those changes do impact all areas of the country. And as a result of that change, the DOJ changed hands. They looked at the settlement and said, nope, we're not okay with this settlement. And they withdrew from their contract. Now we're all in contracts. We're dealing with contracts day in and day out. You can't just cancel. That's a breach of contract. The DOJ thought they could breach that contract. NAR filed suit against them, and in January of last year, the district court ruled in favor of NAR and said, you're right, this is a breach of contract. DOJ should be a part of this settlement agreement. The DOJ appealed that ruling to the Court of Appeals. They had oral arguments in December, and we're still waiting for an opinion on the court. Ultimately, what is the DOJ's goal? They want to see a decoupling of commission. That's kind of the new language that we're hearing out here. They want to see listing brokers and sellers set commission in the listing agreement to pay the listing broker. And they want to see buying brokers and buyers set their commission in the buyer representation agreement. This is how they do it in all other areas of the world. So the DOJ argues it's way better for everybody. So the DOJ argues. In America, we would argue against that, but that's the goal of the DOJ. They want it to be totally separate. The DOJ is suggesting that buyer agents charge hourly rates for their services or a flat fee service. Most of our buyer agents would be millionaires if you were charging hourly rates for your, so maybe not a bad idea. And if the DOJ is successful, they believe that the competition created will ultimately drive real estate commissions down. So DOJ, they're the unknown here. And the reason why I want to watch them closely is they can intervene in any of these settlement agreements. So they have not intervened in the settlements with Anywhere, Remax, and Keller Williams. They've been known to come in last minute at some times and intervene and insert their own rules. We're not sure if they're going to do that yet. Again, we have preliminary approval on those settlements, should be final by May. But with this NAR settlement, I fully expect DOJ to insert themselves somehow. So that's the source to watch. That's a lot of information on very complex litigation. But hopefully that helps. And I can run through some questions.
That's right. And we'll get to the questions and we'll ask a bunch of them. I do want to make one comment here. I often get asked, hey, what do I get for being part of an organization? What do I get for being part of Coldwell Banker? What do I get for being part of Distinctive Properties, Mid-America, et cetera? What do I get from my broker, my leader? And it's one of those things. So for the kids, it's IYK. For those people that are my age, it's if you know, you know. Nobody wants an attorney until they need an attorney. And I'm going to tell you right now, God has blessed us with having this one. So Casey's done a great job for us. Thank you so much for your leadership in this whole deal. We get to ask her a bunch of questions now. I want to make sure that we're clear. I am an employing broker in the state of Idaho. Jeff is an employing broker in the state of Montana. Casey is our in-house counsel. We are not here in any of those capacities. We are just here to deliver some information for you so that you can have a better understanding of what's happened, what's happening right now, and how this will impact you and your customer moving forward. Right. So let's see. Do you want me to ask questions, Carrie, or are you asking those questions?
I can ask them.
Great, thank you.
So Jimmy asked, so to confirm, a buyer cannot ask the seller to pay the buyer's agent commission in the purchase contract. Is this correct?
Yes, that is correct. Offers of compensation and commission cannot be addressed in a purchase agreement in most states.
And then next, in the Colorado purchase contract in broker acknowledgements, there is a section that addresses who pays. There it's not necessarily the buyer asking for seller to pay, right?
I would have to review that contract, and Todd, if you've got more, or Jeff, if you have more familiarity with that section. I'm not certain if that's addressing actual
Yeah,
commission.
in many of the agreements, there is a section in the agreement that makes it clear that somebody is being represented or not being represented. The idea here is to make sure that you're not in a position where later you find out there were monies owed. That is different than a compensation agreement.
Yes, typically we see the agency relationships addressed in that regard. But thank you, Todd.
Next, who is the DOJ?
The DOJ is the Department of Justice. So that's our government, our tax dollars at work.
And then Casey, do you feel there will be an increase in litigation between private buyers and sellers?
Against real estate agents or brokerages? No, because we're covered now as a result of this litigation. You've got a blanket release that's going to cover us from these commission disputes.
Just in the event that what that person was asking was not relating to this, and more relating to the fact that we've got a situation where now you're going to create a stronger atmosphere for dual agency, provided that the states that offer that, I I think is probably what they're talking about, and I would say 100%, and we're going to talk about that here in a minute. Okay, so let's get through sort of the legal stuff, and then we're going to talk about the real practicality of some of the things that are going on.
Would it be realistic to change the rule for those states to allow the compensation to be discussed in an offer?
I think that's something we might see coming out of the different legislatures across the country now as a result of this. I do think we will see some pretty big changes from a legislative and legal perspective. So yes, I think that's possible.
How will this affect buyer referrals, if at all?
It should not affect buyer referrals. Again, if there's an agreement for compensation and that buyer is paying compensation, that referral would still apply. So I think the piece that I could see may be affected is who is paying that commission, but I don't see any changes. As long as we have an agreement for compensation, you should still get paid pursuant to written documented referral agreement that everybody does a good job of getting signed by brokers.
Can an agent negotiate any commission that they want on seller side and buyer side?
Yes.
Will there be an off NAR site that will offer compensation as a marketing fee from listing agent to other agents?
I'm sure Todd may get into this later. I'm not positive, but the technology piece of this is going to be interesting to see how it plays out, because the settlement's very clear that the MLS compensation cannot be on the MLS, but it can appear on any other website, realtor.com, coldwellbanker.com, your Zillow, everybody's favorite. You can offers a compensation there. I don't think our technology is quite up to speed, but I can guarantee you everybody is figuring out how they can put compensation on those websites.
If the judge approves the settlement, which we expect the judge to do, what do we do about our listing agreements? Amendment language from CBDP Legal Counsel.
I expect, so most states have state approved forms that are used for all their transactions. I think all of those state associations are currently looking at reviewing those and updating those forms to be in compliance with the settlement. And yes, that's what we would do here as well. We would make sure all of our forms are updated and in compliance with the settlement. We would have commission agreements, and we would talk through the training on how to use those.
Does our local MLS have the ability to make the rule to include or not include a commission to a buyer's agent, or is this now 100% not allowed?
It is 100% not allowed. All the local MLSs are subject to this NAR. If they're owned by a realtor organization, a member of the state association, part of NAR, they will not be allowed to do that.
If it gets approved, and somebody said, which we expect. Nobody expects that. Just so you know, that's not a fair statement. We have no idea what's going to happen here. We're just reporting what happened on Thursday night, Friday morning. So if it were to get approved, which we don't know, and it wouldn't happen until July.
Will there be a new legal form that we will use to address compensation between buyers and sellers since we cannot put it in the purchase agreement?
Yes, that's the commission agreement that I expect if your brokerage does not already have one, we would have commission agreements within our distinctive properties family available for agents to use. And our amazing sales team would provide some great training on how to use that and address those conversations with your clients.
Is commercial involved in this?
Commercial is involved in terms of if you are part of the franchise that has the settlement, yes, you're involved in that regard. And if you are a member of an MLS, you are involved. So this does apply to real estate, but it is members of NAR. And from a commercial agent perspective, that's a member of a protected franchise, you are involved.
All right, hold on one second. I'm gonna jam through this. So Josh, we're gonna hit the VA question here in just a minute. James, buyer exclusive agency agreements. Yeah, so again, we've always had to have buyer agency agreements. It's sort of one of the reasons why we sort of smirk when we talk about those things. Listen, the truth is many agents have followed in getting buyer agency agreements set at the beginning. Many agents have not, and they've waited until the moment that they're writing an offer to formalize that relationship. In this case, according to the legal documents, they're saying, hey, everybody will be required to have these documents, which should theoretically make it easier for those people that have been uncomfortable asking those questions before, because, hey, listen, now everybody's going to be doing it. But Jeff and the entire team are going to do a great job of teaching everybody how to do that. Yes, Val, we do have listing agreements. Again, we won't be doing anything until we get a little bit closer to better understanding exactly how they're going to handle these things. Retroactive, proactive, we don't know. All right. What should happen? All right, Melanie, we're going to talk about that here in just 1 second as to what we're supposed to be doing. Kelsey's iPhone. Do I need immediate change? No, you do not need any immediate changes. Again, this is all on paper. Same thing, Val, for you. Brenda, we're going to talk about that here in a second, but obviously there's some issues, right? Freddie, Fannie, VA, there's all these rules that all of these people have. And listen, I'm just going to say it out loud, and it's probably not a real popular concept, but if you look over the last, hell, I don't know, look at the last 12 months, like look at the last 60 days. There are plenty of things that people, society, governments, trade organizations, whatever, rules that they adopt. I believe in my heart that most people are good people and they're trying their best to come up with things that they think are the right thing to do. And then we find out later that they didn't, right? There was a time where bicyclists would smoke a cigarette before they went up an incline because they felt like it increased their capacity to breathe. Okay. Like, I'm just going to put it out like that. Obviously at some point we find out that these things are wrong. I expect, and there's all kinds of opinions, but I expect that there's some issues here. We're going to dig into them here in just a minute. But lenders, for example, are going to have to correct some of these. Kurt says, should we expect unrepresented buyers to attempt to buy a home with no agent? Kurt, it's a great question. It's certainly on my heart and on my mind. We're going to talk a little bit more about it here in a second. But I think the short answer is, yeah. I think we're going to see sellers that are going to say, well, I'm going to try not to pay a commission. I think we're going to see buyers say, well, I'm going to try to not pay a commission. I think it really ultimately comes down to the difference between feel and real, and we're going to dig into how we're going to explain those things. Will I be able to offer different commission amounts based on, yeah, I don't know who asked that question, but I'm worried about that. That's a fair housing issue in a big, bad way. Matt Christian, are sellers still allowed to offer compensation? 100%. We're going to deal with that here in just a second. Cody, do we need updated? And maybe coming soon, we'll see if the state's going to keep up. I'm assuming that they will. Aaron, yes, many companies have already broken from NAR. I'm not sure that it's fair. We're going to talk a little bit about that here in just a second as well. If you don't have representation, then you don't have representation, right? I mean, the real estate agent is an entrepreneur. Now, they might be considered a micro entrepreneur or a solopreneur, but still they're 1.5 million strong, and that's a big chunk of the population. It's a huge industry, but one voice is never heard, but 1.5 million of them are. And the call to action really is going to be, hey, listen, who you vote for in your local elections, in your board, in your local boards, in your presidential elections, in your state elections. Obviously, it matters. Like you just heard our attorney talk about how the president's administration broke the contract with the DOJ and NAR. So obviously, this stuff matters, right? Can the commission agreement be attached to the purchase agreement? It's a separate agreement. We're going to talk about that. Kurt's question is the reason for my litigation. Becky, I'd have to go back and find that. All right. Keep the questions coming. I just wanted to roll through those really fast because I still want to make sure that we have enough time to talk about what we do with this, right? Because that's the past. This is the present. These are the facts of what it is that we have to deal with. And now we need to get moving forward because listen, there's a lot of clickbait out there. This is I don't know. I'm sure you guys are seeing it. I mean, 6% commissions free. Real estate agents as we know it gone. Shady practices, like all of this stuff. Y'all, take a deep breath. In through the nose, out through the mouth. If it bleeds, it leads. People are looking for clicks and views, and the way they get those is by putting these crazy headlines and talking crazy stuff. Anybody who has been listening to me for the last 60 days has heard a common thing. Ladies and gentlemen, there are important things in life. And if you don't choose to stand up for what you believe, there will come a day where you won't have the choice to stand up. It's never been more clear than what you're seeing right now with our industry. We have had poor leadership, maybe. Distracted leadership, maybe. Maybe focus on the wrong things, maybe, within NAR. I get it. And yet throwing NAR out completely doesn't do any of us any good. There is another organization that's out there that's trying to be born and grow. It's called the American Real Estate Association. They only launched in January as an alternative to NAR. I think that's worth looking at. But I think probably more worth looking at is for all of those in the industry that believe this industry is good and noble, that is doing great things for both buyers and sellers, helping people accomplish their American dream. For all of you who have elected not to serve on the local level with the MLS, not to serve on the state level or the national level, and allow others to do that for you, it's probably time for you to stand up, right? It's probably time for you to say, hey, listen, it's time for common sense to bring back. Like come on, right? We should have common sense going in our trade organization. It doesn't make any of those other people bad people, but listen, in life, we know there are people that go to do things to make sure that they get seen. And then there are people that go to do things to make sure that things get done, all right? We need people that want to get things done, that will raise their hand and serve on the local, state, regional, and national level. Okay, that's all I'm going to say about that. Now, Jeff, we got to bring you in here. We got to talk about buyers.
Yes. Yes. Can you guys hear me okay? Huge change.
Yeah. Give him a thumbs up if you can hear him, please.
Okay. All right. So now more than ever, I mean, I think we would all agree that buyers have never been more educated from the access to data and all that stuff. I mean, social media plays a humongous role really in a buyer's knowledge of what's actually happening within the market. Yes. Do some of them get sucked into the news outlets in the world? Absolutely. But Now, guys, if you haven't been doing already, the buyers are going to be looking to you and saying, all right, pal, what is it that I get if I hire you? And I truly believe this is an opportunity for you. I think your ability to clearly articulate your value through a buyer's representation or buyer's representative has never been more vital. So let's go through what I'm sure every single one of you guys on this phone call are doing on an everyday basis when they come in path of a new buyer. So first things first, we're going to walk them through our buyer's consult at a very high and thorough level. So let me try this on for size. So first things first, guys, you're going to bring them to the office. What an idea, right? You're bring them to the office, you're going to meet them at a coffee shop, whatever the case may be, but you're going to go through a couple different steps. You're going to go through an LP Mama, and you're probably going, Jeff, what is this crazy old acronym that you're using? L stands for location, P stands for price. What price are you looking to be in and around? M is a mortgage. What are you looking to do? Are you doing it cash? Are you going to go finance it? Motivation, right? What kind of motivation are we looking for? Our agent, are you currently working with somebody exclusively? Make sure you guys add that word to your vocabulary. And then, of course, we're going to walk through the appointment itself. We're going to set that next appointment. We never leave the first appointment until we've set the second one. Then, oh my gosh, crazy idea here. You're going to review each and every document that they would sign, line by line, which means you have to know what line 218 of your purchase agreement or your buy-sell reads. Upside down, you have to be that good. Your authorization to communicate, your buyer broker form, or if it's moved to a buyer representative, I don't care what the names are, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You have to make sure, guys, that these folks on the other end not only understand the documents, but understand you walking through everything to say, whoa, this cat's an actual professional. Then we're going to jump into what happens when we get to the point of us submitting an offer. Oh my gosh, well, this is what's going to happen. We're going to submit the offer. They're going to have a response time. In the offer, we're going to have contingency dates, all that stuff. Guys, you were going to be so transparent, so crystal clear as what you actually do for them. If you guys were on the skills class yesterday, we walked through some of those different items from a listing side, right? One of the most powerful things that I think you can provide in a listing presentation are all the 202 things that you do for your seller. Imagine what it looks like if you had something like that on the buyer's side. Oh, you don't want to pay me? Are you getting this, Miss Steen? Okay, you're not. Great. So now you would in the event that you hired me. All of the different things, all the things that you guys are doing on a regular basis, on an everyday basis, but most importantly, putting on a sheet of paper to show your value. The next step, you're going to go through the MLS. You're going to go through and identify some of those different properties that they think they want to see. Whoa, let's go shopping, everybody, right? Then we're going to go through, we're actually going to talk about the current market conditions because cousin Vito in the basement on the East Coast is telling them one thing when the market's telling us another thing. We've got to make sure that remember, and always remember, real estate is local. Show them the statistics, be able to articulate them. Guess what? Your VP of sales loves numbers. So if you ever have an interest and be like, Jeff, teach me how to interpret numbers, call me, give me the data, give me 15 minutes and I got your back. Then we're going to set up those automatic searches within IQ. And what's different about this versus the MLS notifications, right? You guys have all set those up maybe as some backstop, the haystack. This allows them, y'all, to get into their portal and start moving stuff around, start tweaking. What do we always say? Buyers are liars. Yes, I want the condo downtown. And then next thing you know, they buy the ranch at the base of the Bridger Mountains here in beautiful Bozeman. Like, let's be real. It's insane how many times they flip-flop. And then, holy smokes, when the time comes, let's go shopping. Let's go shopping. Now, here's the biggest thing, guys. And it's a mental thing. Because some agents already out there have done an amazing job at getting folks to sign these buyer representative forms, these buyer brokes, well in advance before they even show them a property. Heck, before they even send them an email of what's out there. But if you were like me, I didn't do it. You want to know why? Because I was just like, let's go get it, let's go get it, let's go get it. And then once we get something under contract, then we'll backfill. Well, that always made people nervous. Like, I can't ask somebody. Why not? It's a contract. Just like Todd said before, you only need an attorney when you need an attorney, right? So now here's the thing, guys. Like, you remember, oh my God, my own business model. What am I going to do? Guys, everybody is going to have to do this. So we're just going to have to get over that one little mental block that maybe some of us have never been able to get through. Again, I was one of those folks that was like, I'll just do it at the end. Like 2 days before closing, oh crud, I forgot. There's a document that I need you to sign. Is it cool now? Right? Like, we're just going to do it very, very, very much up front. Cool? Awesome. So what in the world does this mean for sellers? Well, I think, and we would all agree, it goes back to our approach over the last month and a half, 2 months, is this commitment for our agents to get one listing every single day, every month, or excuse me, one listing per agent every single month. Well, listings are king, guys. If you haven't figured this thing out by now, I mean, if Thursday
That's new.
wasn't enough,
That's not always been that way.
no, absolutely not. But if Thursday
I'm teasing.
wasn't enough,
It's always been. If you want to last in this business, you got to list in this business, right?
Absolutely.
Hey, I want to interrupt for 1 second. So specific to buyers, and now we're going to get into sellers, but I want to make sure we check whatever boxes we need to on the buyer side. If you listen, here's my poll question to you. Okay, in a real estate transaction, who has traditionally paid the commission? If you think it's the buyer, put B in the chat. If you think it's the seller, put S in the chat. Okay. And we'll total all those things up here and we'll go from there. So from a buyer's perspective, we have got to educate, because I think there were a couple of people that were on there that said, hey, listen, is this going to mean that people are going to try to go directly to the sellers? I think that we're going to see that. I think common sense would tell us that. I don't really know. I think that's the point. Like, there's so many people that are out there like, oh, this is going to be, it's the way it's going to be. And, you know, I can see it online, right? People saying, oh, Zillow's going broke. And then the other one says, Zillow is going to take over the world. I'm like, well, which is it? Right? I mean, I know that when the settlement was announced, all of the real estate companies' stock values went down, right? What does that mean? Well, I don't know. I mean, there are companies that are trading on the stock market that have yet to make a dollar, that are trading for more than those companies that make hundreds of millions of dollars a year. So if we're going to bet on our future based on what Wall Street is doing, y'all, we got some major problems. Okay, Wall Street is not a monetary, moral, or ethical compass that any of us should be using to follow. Right. So what was the verdict here? I saw a bunch of things come through
kind
here.
of split.
It did look.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was shocked, to be that honest with you.
Yeah. That's
That
pretty
just
good.
means
Yeah.
we have very, very smart agents.
Well, but here's
Because
the thing, right? So
what do we always hear?
if we're in the business and we can't come to a consensus, then what do you think the consumer is doing?
Right.
Okay. Now, I guess technically the seller is paying the commission because of the technicality of a settlement sheet and the funds and the disbursement. But who's paying the money in to even have money to disperse? Well, that's the buyer, right? So what we're saying is that all along, a buyer and a seller have participated in the payment of commissions. In every contract or every transaction, there are three contracts. There's the contract between the listing agent and the seller, a contract between the buyer's agent and the buyer, and the contract between the seller and the buyer. That's not changing. That's not changing. Is that clear? Does that help some people out?
I think so.
Okay. So Casey made mention the fact that the only website that you're not going to be able to see compensation is going to be the MLS, which is going to create some problems, right? And I said we didn't put what do you call it? Slides together, but I got notes all over my desk. Right. And so I want to talk just a couple of seconds about that. What that means on paper, like, I don't know what the solution is going to be. Right. Maybe Coldwell Banker or maybe Anywhere will come up with a solution. That would be wonderful. Right. Casey brought up a great point. If the MLS can't post what the commission co-op is, but the MLS is where all of these websites are getting the data, including Zillow and Realtor and so on and so forth. Well, then how are they going to get the commission information? Good point, right? So I believe that the local brands, not the local brands, the national brands are going to have to solve this because they have a accurate understanding. This could be good for you, I guess, is my point, right? This could be good, right? This is going to mean that you're going to have to work a lot better with your fellow agents. And what is that going to look like? Well, listen, first of all, answer your GD phone. Okay. No, we laugh, but it's pathetic. It's pathetic how many times we call another agent and we can't get them on the phone. It's the number one complaint I get from our agents or any agents that I talk to. How do you get that person to respond? Because they'll call and then they send a text message, right? You're going to have to answer your phone. You're going to have to be kind and professional. And you're going to have to follow the rules, right? I've already heard people talking about, oh, well, maybe we can do this. And what if we do this? And what if we do that? No. Follow the rules. The rules are going to come out. I think the rules are going to change. We're going to talk a little bit about VA and Fannie and all that kind of stuff. Listen, there's going to be some problems here that the federal government and other organizations are going to have to fix in order for this to work properly. If it doesn't work properly, it's not going to just hurt us. In fact, I know we're talking about us, but we're really not talking about us. We're talking about the customer. This is an absolute disaster for the rights of the consumers. This is effectively trying to motivate consumers from being properly represented and exposing them to millions, if not billions of dollars of liability.
Todd,
we all have E&O insurance. Huh?
I mean, to that point too, what our local news last night ran a big story on this, and all the headlines have been really rah, we don't want to pay those agents commission. That's kind of been it. The focus of this story was a first-time home buyer who was devastated because they just bought their first house, but they said, if I had to pay commission, I wouldn't have been able to get into this home. And that's been the long argument from NAR this whole time. We're trying to protect those first-time home buyers too, to get into these properties they may not otherwise be able to afford. So it's just interesting change that we're going to see for people, and there will be real harm.
There will be. We're talking about the VA, right? I mean, so I talked about this number yesterday. I haven't done the research to substantiate the number. Okay, so there. But what I was told was that over 80% of the loans that are being done in the United States of America are Freddie, Fannie, and VA loans. And all of them have rules around compensation of buyers' agents. And most notably is the VA says that a buyer they are precluded from compensating an agent. The agent has to be compensated from the seller. Now think about that for a minute. Under these proposed rules, this proposed settlement, what you're essentially saying is, hey, Mr. and Mrs. VA, you fought for our country, you risked your life for your country, your family risked their lives for the country. Like, this is a big deal. These are people that have done the unthinkable for us, right? You can't be represented. You can't buy the house that you want to buy because they're not offering compensation, or you can risk the liability. It's bad, y'all. It's bad. So the government's going to have to fix these things as we move forward. I do believe that they will fix them. I don't know anybody's ever seen the government move that quickly, but well, I guess we'll see. I guess we'll see. I think mortgage companies are going to have to come up with some solutions as to how to bury fees in loans. I don't mean that in a illegal way, but I mean, have them work that way. I think Freddie and Fannie are going to have to come up with some rule adjustments as to how they calculate down payments and that kind of thing. But ultimately, this is a blow to the consumer well-being, not so much the real estate well-being. Because listen, bottom line is, like, I want you to think of a river. We all come up to the river. We all need to get to the other side of the river. Well, there's multiple ways to get to the other side of the river. We can wade through the river. We can swim across the river. We can build a little barge and float across the river. We can go buy a boat and motor across the river. We can fly over the river. We can build a bridge and drive over the river, but we're getting over the river. Okay. Just because this is the way we've always done it doesn't make it right, wrong, or indifferent. It just is. We will find another way to get across the river. Okay. So that's our job, and that's what we get paid the big bucks for. The other thing that I get is, hey, listen, all of the agents are going away. Right? This is it. Well, I mean, for those agents that choose to be distracted by this and curl up in a ball and use this as a reason as to why they're not going to make it, they are not going to make it. That's the cruel reality. But folks, we already know 90% don't. So that shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. This is just the soup du jour, right? Remember, the soup du jour 4 years ago was COVID. But then there was this incredible, turned out to be about 6% of the population, the real estate population. They ended up making 90% of the money. I don't know if you knew that stat or not, but so it used to be the 80-20 rule. Well, it turned into the 6% rule. 6% of the agents decided that COVID was not a bad thing, was actually a good thing. And they went out and made all the money. Okay. And then it was interest rates. And now it's the NAR settlement. It's going to continue to change, folks. It's going to change, and you have to adapt. Okay. Listen, I know some of you had 1 hour on your books. I'm going to stick around. I'm going to stay on this call for the next 45 minutes, and I'm going to answer any and every question that you've got. So you don't worry about if you got to leave. Great to see you. If you would like a recording of this and you are not part of our organization, if you're an outside, please put your email address in the chat, and we will email you the recording once we're done. Okay. All right, Jeff, we need to get on. Oh, I'm sorry. Were there other questions about buyers?
Couple more questions, Todd, just on that same discussion we had earlier about charging different fees to sellers for helping unrepresented buyers. I would caution against that. You're going to enter into dangerous territory from, like Todd said, a fair housing perspective. But those are some of the little nuances we'll be able to work through as we get updated agreements, as we look at a la carte models, maybe different ways we could help an unrepresented buyer through a transaction.
Robert, I have no idea. Here's what I would say. There is no logic behind not allowing real estate professionals to post how people would get paid and what the impact to the customer would be, but allowing every other website to. It makes no sense whatsoever. To buyers are paying. Okay, there we go. If I am missing your questions, I'm sorry. There's a bunch of them in here. So, can you all go over what liability specific consumers would be exposed to? Tammy, I'm gonna answer just from a broker knowledge, but probably Casey's the better one. But listen, from a limited, so in the state that I function, we have agency, dual agency, and limited dual agency. When you have agency, there is a buyer representative and there is a seller representative. We each have very specific duties to our clients. The minute you get into a dual agency situation, effectively what's happening is the duties owed to the customer get reduced, if not eliminated. Okay. And you end up with some basic customer duties, which are nothing. It's not good for the customer. It may be good for the agent because the agent gets paid on both sides, but it is not good for the customer. So the liabilities that get created, I mean, listen, I've seen all kinds of craziness, right? Well, I think the words are knew or should have known. Well, what about seller disclosure documents? What about not filling out the documents properly? What about failure to close? What about, like, there are so many different ones. And right now, when there are representations involved, both buyer and seller has their own, well, then the liabilities fall on the representative and their E&O insurance. Is the minute you carve that out, now you're talking about one agent being responsible for all of it, regardless of whether or not they didn't sign a representation agreement. It's coming at you, right? We all know you don't have to have a reason to sue somebody. You just need an attorney, right? Well, I don't think you need an attorney. And so the liability is there. But by the way, the consumer does not have insurance that covers them in those liability. That's the importance of having E&O insurance. That's what's another reason why you would have an agent. Casey, did I miss anything?
No, I just would like to clarify, you mentioned dual agency may be better for the agent because they get paid more, but as a lot of our agents in Iowa have heard me say, a famous quote by the notorious BIG, "Mo money, mo problems." And I would be very careful if you start getting into dual agency, you better dot your I's and cross your T's, because if you want to end up in the courtroom, that's a fast track to be there.
Thanks for being here, JJ. All right, does anyone collect a deposit retainer when signing? Oh, that's interesting. I would love to know the answer there.
I haven't seen in my practice yet agents starting to, but I think that's another one of those changes, practice changes we might start to see. Obviously, retainers are common in the practice of law. It's possible we could start seeing little practice changes like that happen, along with, like I mentioned, buyers charging hourly rates, doing a la carte services, flat fee representation. They may take half up front, half later. Those will be things that will kind of shake out over the next few months.
Yeah. And Kurt, hopefully that answers your question. I don't think that this really changes. I think you're going to see a whole plethora of new ways of charging commissions, and they're going to be fees and percentages and flats and all kinds of craziness. Okay. Thank you, Jen, for your service there. All right. Can we even practice dual agency in Colorado? Yeah, Joni, I know what you're saying, and yes, you guys have that special relationship. I think the point here is you guys are either representatives or your transaction brokers. Once you become and I can't remember your terminology, but once you're standing in the middle, both people lose the level of representation that they would have had if they were just being represented by one person, and one person was representing them. That's my only point. Okay. As a listing agent, if a buyer is unrepresented, should you direct them? Yeah, right. I love that, Val.
Direct to their attorney, and they can, if they're not working with an agent, they can hire an attorney to write those agreements for them.
And introduce them to another agent in your office.
Mm-hmm.
The way to do it. Substantial services. Just to clarify, we will have buyer representation and buyer compensation agreements. Yes, Chelsea, we will have all of those. Dual agencies. Oh, yes, thank you. Okay. All right, Jeff, let's talk about sellers. Yes. What does this mean?
Well, the objective's not changed, right? In my opinion, our job as a listing agent is to sell their home. This is my opinion, to sell their home for the highest acceptable price in the shortest amount of time. That is our job. That has not changed one bit whatsoever. What has changed, though, is that they will now, in theory, not have to offer up a buyer's compensation. That's their prerogative. Now, it's our job to make sure that they see both sides of this. And what I mean by that, as the great Kate Rossi once said, Mr. Seller, I charge 3.5%. What do you want to charge the buyer's agent? I think that is plain and simple. And yes, that's kind of fun and cute, clever. But the reality is these sellers are going to have to understand, why in the world would I actually pay in addition to if I didn't have to? So Todd, you shared with me something the other day. You told me that 97, y'all, of all properties sold had a buyer's agent on the other side. 97% of all transactions had a buyer's agent on the other side. That leaves 3 that simply said, you know what, I've done this plenty of times. I'm cool. I'm good. I'll figure this whole thing out. But like we tell FSBOs, how often, Todd, do you handle contracts? How familiar are you with handling inspection notices? How frequently do you speak with lenders and appraisers and all of the stuff that goes with it? Again, this goes back, guys, to the 202 things that we do on the listing side. This goes back to how many ever things there are on the buyer side of showing our value to say, hey, listen, you're a professional. You're an attorney. I can actually go into the court of law and represent myself, but I think I'd probably do myself a disservice if I just showed up not knowing anything about nothing. Okay, same goes on this end. There are some people who minimize what it is that we do, but the reality is if we go to the dentist, can I pull my own tooth? Probably. Do I think it's a good idea? Probably not, right? So the long and the short of it is, guys, we have to make sure that the sellers understand that, hey, listen, in the event of a mistake that occurs at the 11th hour that says, hey, Todd, you and your family do not get to move to fill in the blank area, South Florida, wherever, Palm Springs, because the buyer who decided to not to be represented screwed something up and now they can't afford the home. So now your dreams and your desires and your next chapter of your life have just been completely wiped off the table. So Casey, don't you think it would behoove us to make sure that we have an agent on the other side who could probably work through these things on a regular basis, or who does that on a regular basis? Now, hey, by all means, do I know that not all agents are created equal? I am the first to tell you that. Not everybody is as good as the folks that are on this phone call. But I liken this to a client that Kelsey, my wife, is working with right now. He's more than capable of putting together a project on the outskirts of town. It's a small project, but he's going to do some stuff and all that kind of fun stuff. But it makes sense to have representation from his architect, from his general contractor, to go on his behalf to get in front of the city or the county council to make sure that this project goes from point A to point Z in a timely manner, not in the event just to have the finished product, but rather in a timely manner so that he can start to maybe receive some of his investment back, right, to his ROI. So we must be uber confident in our ability, guys, to clearly articulate what it is that we actually do. So we go over all those things as a listing agent. Like I said yesterday, like I've said today, we're going to walk them through the entire proven process, start to finish. We're going to show them what proven advertising looks like. We're going to actually show them what proven technology looks like, what proven compliance actually looks like and why it's there. We're going to show them the knowledge, our proven knowledge of the market as a whole, so that we can ensure that they are making the best decisions for themselves. Because remember, as a salesperson, our job is to do what? Not all at once. Let me hear you. Our job is to help people make decisions that help themselves. And this is a wonderful way for us to be able to do. That's all I got for you, Todd.
I love it. Hey, listen, I think you guys are seeing it. Like we need you to be sales assassins. We've always needed you to be sales assassins, but now you need to be a sales assassin. Like it's perfect alignment. You need to know what to say, when to say, and how to say it. You need to have proven processes. You've got to have a team. Being a solopreneur is not going to work, right? I know many of you are like, yeah, but I do that. I don't care. You're going to have a team. You're going to have to really sell value here. I know how valuable you are, but you have to sell value. The consumer needs to know how valuable you are. But listen, the show's got to go on. The show's nothing's changed between now and July. We all are. That's our selling time. We've got to get after it. We are. By the way, do me a favor. If you have had a customer ask you about the commission, if you've had a seller say, "So I don't have to pay buyer's commission," will you just put a raised hand in the chat here? I want to talk about that. So I want to go through some of the things that we're hearing out there, right? One of the things that I'm hearing out there right now is the prices are going to drop. The reason the prices are going to drop is because they've been artificially inflated because of these commissions, right? Okay. I'm not sure about you, but the commissions don't drive prices. That is not how these things work, right? The prices are driven by what buyers are willing to pay for them. And obviously inflation has happened. Interest rates being down happened. That's what drove prices. Commissions did not drive prices. So there is no evidence whatsoever to expect that this will have any impact on home prices. In fact, we can go back to the data on for sale by owners, and we can see that actually those people who went it alone actually got less money for their home, and a substantial amount less than those people who went it with an agent. So the representation actually did help. And then of course, our brand boasts that they have a 16% price premium. So these would all indicate that that's not accurate, right? The other one we're hearing, obviously, and a lot of it's clickbait, is that the 6% commission is gone, right? It will cease to be the norm. I actually agree with that. I actually do agree that the 6% commission is no longer the norm. And you might as well start acting like it's no longer the norm as of today. The difference is that the norm will be what the seller pays the listing agent and what the buyer pays the buyer's agent. Listen, this is a little known secret, but as we have trained agents to have better conversations, we've seen an increase in the average commission rate taken for listings, not a decrease. I'm going to say that again. Okay. Everybody's talking about, oh, the average commission is 2.5%. Okay. But the more we've talked to people and given them the lethal scripts, right? Remember the lethal book of scripts, what to say, when to say, how to say it. And Jeff alluded to it. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, thank you so much. I'm going to do all of these things. This is going to be what I'm going to charge. All we have to do now is determine what we're going to pay the buyer's agent. Those agents' commissions have actually gone up. So I actually think that this is going to be potentially a positive thing from an income perspective for those agents that approach this as true professionals, right? Now, I also think that there are going to be lots and lots of discounters out there. They're going to say, hey, we'll represent you on the buy side for 12 cents. But those exist today. Now, they may get more noise and more media attention here in the short term, but listen, there's always somebody out there selling snake oil, folks. We see it all the time. Never has it been more important to be part of a really big, notable brand with great referral opportunities and networks, with an in-house counsel, with vice presidents of sales, people that are actually doing the training. So anyway, that's that one. The one that kind of has the hair on the back of my head standing up a little bit is this whole idea of manipulating and steering and playing favorites. I don't know how to say this and not sound like Chicken Little, but I'm going to do my best. Okay. If there is no requirement to disclose, in fact, it's required that we not disclose within our own trade organization's website what the compensation is. What that means is that if I have a listing and Jeff has a client, and maybe I know the client, or maybe I know the types of clients that Jeff represents, and he calls me, and we'll use Casey too. Casey's got a client. I love Casey. She's great. So when Casey calls me and she says, hey, Todd, because this is what's going to happen. Hey, Todd, what's the compensation? Is the seller offering any compensation to the buyer's agent? I've got a VA buyer, blah, 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 whatever, right? Oh, yeah. Hey, Casey, how are you? That's fantastic. Well, it's 3%. And then I hang up the phone and Jeff calls and I'm like, oh, it's Jeff, right? Well, maybe I don't even answer the call. Maybe that's how I handle it. Maybe I just don't respond. Or maybe I pick up the phone and I'm like, hey, Jeff, hey, is there compensation? Yeah, it's 1%. But I just got off the phone with Casey and I told her 3%. That is literally steering. And that is putting all of the power in the real estate professional's hands, not where it belongs, which is in the consumer's hands. That's why I say this is a really sad, sad thing for consumer rights. this is a bad thing for people steering clients. And listen, there's all kinds of different opinions out there. All right. But I think that's going to be a hard one, and we are going to have to rise to the occasion. As real estate professionals, we are going to have to rise to the occasion and do the right thing, period, end of story. Not the right thing by us, but the right thing by our customers. I touched on this just a minute ago. Of course, everybody's saying that the real estate industry as we know it, there will be no real estate agents, and 90% of them are gone, blah, 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 blah. Listen, 90% of them are already gone. Okay. You just have to make the determination as to whether or not it's going to be you or not. We already know the numbers. 51% of the real estate agents last year didn't have a transaction. That's brutal. I'm sorry. Of the people that made it, the average income is $43,000. I'm sorry. You didn't get in this business to earn $43,000. Thank the Lord, our average agent makes way more than that. And it's because they're committed to building a career, not just getting a sale, right? Those people who are professional, that pour into their craft, that learn their craft, that align themselves, surround themselves with other professionals, that align themselves with other brands that further their brand, etc. Listen, this is all really great stuff, okay? So I don't expect that to be a fundamental sea change, right? Because if you've got a bunch of people that are just fine keeping their license, not doing any business, I don't expect that to change just because the rules change, right? I mentioned to you before that, like, you know, half the world thinks that Zillow and Realtor and all these other companies are going to put us all out of business, and then the other half thinks, well, that, you know, that obviously they're going out of business. I don't really know the answer. What I do know is that somebody's going to benefit from the fact that the MLS no longer is the keeper of all of the important information. And somebody's going to rise to the occasion and solve it. And maybe it's not Zillow. Maybe it's, you know, some competitor we've never even heard of. Hell, we didn't even know who Zillow was 15, 16 years ago. Okay. So that's all I can say about that. Okay. Do we have more questions in there that we need to answer before I close up here?
Any thoughts on the CFPB jumping on this train? Probably, maybe. I mean, they're part of the government also, so they're watching this closely. But just know under the current administration, they're probably going to be sided with the DOJ and be aligned in their approach there. So something to watch for. Confirming nothing is changing until the July. So yeah, the settlement is still in proposal phases. That will take months, but per the settlement, they will start implementing these changes in July of this year. So that is correct. Todd, there's a question by Val.
Yeah, I see it. I mean, you know, Val, the short answer is I don't know. You know, I'm being a bit of a conspiracy theorist here for sure. But I'm, you know, listen, there's some wacky stuff that gets done. And this to me seems to open this up for people to be able to do just that. I don't like Casey, so I don't want to do a deal with her. This is how I'm going to handle it. I'm just not going to answer the phone. Well, where else are you going to get the information? Well, I guess I can go to another site, or I don't know. Listen, it's a tough deal, and we know that if the Zillows of the world are the keepers of better information than our own trade organization, well, we have a bit of a problem. Is it possible? Yeah, anything's possible, Kathy. Anything is possible. You don't want to make this a political issue, but y'all, it is a political issue. We are literally taught that we can't talk about politics and religion and business, and yet this is why they don't want you talking about politics and religion. Because if they can silence you to talk about these common sense things, then they can do whatever it is that they want. I mean, just look what's going on with the NCAA right now. You know, like common sense would tell you that well, there's two things going on in the NCAA. I'd be interested to know where your mind went, but there's two things going on, right? One is that these student athletes are being paid millions of dollars. And literally what these coaches, you just saw Nick Saban come out and publicly say, hey, the job's changed. I was here to build great men for the future, and all they care about is getting paid. Well, that's nonsense. Yeah. The other thing that's going on is, that a biological man was allowed to swim against biological women, and at the time that seemed to be an okay thing. But I don't know if you all saw that. Common sense has prevailed, and now those awards or medals or whatever have been given to the person that rightfully should have won. But again, there are things that happen in our world that if left to the maybe loud minority, bad things happen. And I think that this is an example of what's happened here with the class action lawsuit. Common sense is not prevailing. All right, I'm going to close up. So here's the deal. My takeaways, right? Number one, know the facts. Know the facts. Don't allow emotion to dictate this. Know the facts, provide great value. I'm talking about 20x value. You're not going to be able to just hand a listing presentation and expect that everything's going to be okay. That is not going to get it done. You're going to have to know the facts, sell your value. You're selling proven process. You're selling a team of professionals. Being a solopreneur is going to be really, really hard moving forward, because if that's all you got to sell, I'm just going to do it for less over here on some website. Okay. Buyers are still going to need to buy. Okay. People are still going to form families. They're still going to have life changes. They're still going to have new jobs. They are going to need to buy. Sellers are still going to need to sell. Last I checked, the last person you want doing surgery on you is you. You hire a professional for that. The reason you hire a professional for that is because it can be very painful and lots of mistakes will get made if you're doing the surgery on yourself. Your house is exactly the same thing. You are the surgeon. You are the pro. You are the assassin. Act like it. You will need to list to last in this business. If I had to pick an area that I was concerned, it would be for the buyer's agent. While I don't think it's fair and I don't think it's right, I think that buyers should have representation. It should be really, really strong representation. I do believe that there are going to be the misconceptions out there as a buyer that if I go directly to a listing agent, I'm going to get it for less, or hell, even with like the VA is a perfect example. They're going to be told, well, sorry, like they're not allowed to pay the buyer's agent. So whether we like it or not, there are going to be people that are going to try to go direct, and that means there's going to be less business for buyer's agents. So you are going to need to get focused on being a listing agent. Luckily, you're at an organization that understands that at a high level and offers the right tools, training, support, and systems and technology to be able to make that happen, right? Okay. This is not about you. As much as we are talking about you, as much as we're talking about the real estate industry, it is not about you. It is about your customer. Jeff said it. Our job is to make sure that our clients get what they need. I love Zig Ziglar's line. It is true. If you want to make more money, you will help enough other people get what they want. The money is ancillary. It's secondary. And I just want to make sure that we all remember that this is about the customer, and it's about doing what's right for the consumer. Okay. If you are, again, if you are part of our organization, you will get this email. We will be sending it out to you. If you're not part of our organization and want a recording of this, please put that in the chat. Jeff, if they want to get a hold of you, how do they do that?
Jeff.Renevere@cbdistinctive.com. I'll type it into the deal.
Beautiful. Thank you. Casey, if somebody wants to get in connection with you, how do they do it?
Casey.steen@cbdistinctive.com. I'll also add to the chat.
Beautiful. Listen, my preferred are you either go to my Instagram, it's Todd P. Conklin. If you DM me, Assassin, I will get you a free copy of our lethal scripts for sales assassins. And I'll give you my cell number. It's 208-720-5326. Text me, right? I hope this was hope this was beneficial to you. I'm not sure that we brought any greatness here, but it certainly is great to have Casey on the call and our training master, Jeff. So if there's anything at all that we can do for you, please let us know. Y'all, if somebody needs to see this, will you please share it with them? All right. Like seriously, this is important on the heels of the Oracle himself, the KCM founder, Steve Harney's passing. He'd be rolling over right now, stomping his feet. This is the time for you as leaders in an industry to stand up and lead and control the narrative. All right. God bless y'all.